Welcome to the latest episode of the Vinyl and Celluloid podcast. Halloween is just around the corner, and what a better opportunity to revisit one of the greatest horror franchises of all time, A Nightmare on Elm Street. Joining me in this 9-movie journey is Liam, known in the Instagram horror community as I Know What You Did Last Midsommar. We'll be covering the franchise's highs and lows, director Wes Craven's commitment to the series, and Freddy Krueger's relevance, evolution, and role as a pop culture icon. Since we'll be talking about the most surprising moments in the series, including some of the goriest and creative killings, this episode is rated S for spoilers. So Liam, how did you get into A Nightmare on Elm Street? I know it's iconic enough, but it's always interesting to hear the story.
My best friend when I was very little, his parents, they were big Nightmare on Elm Street fans, and they found out that I was just beginning to get into horror. I was covering Halloween and Friday the 13th at that point, and they still had all the Nightmare on Elm Street VHSs. So we didn't have the DVDs released out here until I think they released the first three in about 2007. So they were
Oh
relatively
wow.
hard to come by, but they lent me the first one, and I have to admit, at the time, it didn't really click with me, just because I think I was more impressed with just I guess the bluntness of Friday the 13th. Not to be patronizing or anything,
Yeah.
it was more. Nightmare on Elm Street took a much more visceral and psychological approach, and
Mhm.
it wasn't until I was a little older that when I went back to them, it's like, this is really, really good.
Yeah.
Um, I did watch the first three when I was young, and I didn't see the other ones until like much, much later. But
Mhm.
I remember as a kid, the third one was my favorite, just because that one was just it was just crazy. That was when they were really trying to up I guess the dream sequences and just
Yeah.
how wild can we make this? Just how it takes on sort of like a Hellraiser vibe as the films go along, where they just
Mhm.
get a
Mhm.
lot more messed up and gothic, but also fun and just yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's the one I actually made more notes about because it's also my favorite. I mean, it's also very interesting that you said it was difficult to come by. So to tell you just a bit of my experience with the franchise, I was aware of Freddy Krueger. Like you said, it was in Portugal at the time. It was very rare to find like the complete VHS collection, even to rent. Like I recall seeing a dusty yellow VHS cover of Nightmare on Elm Street 4. My cousin went to like this slumber party and she watched part 2. So it's like all over the place, right? No consistency. So my first contact with the franchise, like really watching, was in 2004 when the DVD was released, DVD for Freddy vs. Jason. So I actually started at the end. And in the year later, in 2005, we got the full franchise release. So it was actually the last franchise I got into, but the first one I completed because I just went to Blockbuster and rented all. At the time, 7 movies because Freddy vs. Jason was not canon, or at least not the same distributor. And so yeah, I watched them all like in like I think 2 weeks. So I was pretty much done. Yeah, no, it was the beginning of summer holidays, and I had plenty of time, so I was just kind of like, cool, just grab them all and go through them. And immediately, like, I guess I had the benefit of watching everything like kind of a mini marathon, and that was, I mean, it impressed me, but I could still spot like some of the franchise lows. Part 5, and yeah, yeah. But yeah, overall, I think yeah, that was it. And then I went to the movies to see the remake, and we'll get to that point later. But yeah, how do you mentioned that? So you liked, or when you first watched Nightmare on Elm Street, you ranked it maybe lower than Friday the 13th or Halloween because of its more cerebral approach that didn't connect with a younger viewer. But how would you rank the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise within the horror lore?
I think it's pretty high up for me, to be honest. Halloween is obviously for me like just the number one. So as a
Mm,
kid, it was Friday, the Scream films, I would say, and
mm,
I'm sure I'm missing out on a whole bunch at the moment. But Nightmare on Elm Street climbed the ranks pretty quickly, just because the first four in particular and New Nightmare, they're just really good films.
yeah,
Obviously, they all have their own kind of aesthetic. Um, the series does change direction a lot as it goes on, but I kind of like that. It doesn't.
mm,
There's obviously there's a new director with every film, so I think for a while there they were really able to sort of hone in on like what can we do a little differently this time. You know, there's like obviously Wes Craven. You know,
yeah,
he's just the master at this kind of stuff, and then the second one takes on a whole very psychological approach. It's just dark. It's really, really dark. And the third one is a lot more fun. A lot more. That's why I think I liked it as a kid, just because it was a lot more accessible to me, and just
yeah.
it was just very entertaining. And the fourth one
Mhm.
is like a very nice blend of being just really insanely dark, and also the entertainment value of the third one. So
Yeah,
I think that's what I like about this franchise is just the general versatility of it. It yeah, it's as I
that's it.
as I was going through the films on this particular occasion, I was
Yeah.
really impressed by even the low ones, even the lower points. It's just like okay, I can at least appreciate that they were trying to do something different with each one.
That's absolutely right because I mean, I completely get your point, and that's something that as I was like writing some notes for this episode, I did realize it's really every movie tends to be somewhat unique in a genre that is easily tackled by being like a carbon copy of every single other entry,
Exactly.
whether it's within a franchise or not. And that's also the other thing. I guess we like you mentioned that the franchise ranks high for you, but also Freddy Krueger. It's I know well. Jason's hockey mask is part of the pop culture landscape, but I think Freddy Krueger, his presence is like felt it's reaches beyond what Jason ever did, right? Because you had I started to think like how many occasions had Freddy Krueger and A Nightmare on Elm Street been referenced, and you got Rick and Morty, like Scary Terry, right? The well,
Yeah,
copyrights wouldn't allow them to use anybody the real name. You got there was a sequence in Fresh Prince of Bel Air where Will Smith just Carlton is driving and is like, number two, do this, number three, do that. And then Will shows up with like the glove and a mask saying, number four, remove stick out of butt, and all that. You got he Robert Englund portrayed the role again in that sitcom that's airing, the Goldbergs. I watched a couple of
no,
episodes before, and I did watch that one because he was guest starring.
that's so
And
cool.
even yeah, yeah, and even Ronald Reagan quoted the show, so it's kind of like it's massive. And it sorry, quoted the movie. So I think it was massive, and it was really ingrained into pop culture.
From Wes Craven, director of The Hills Have Eyes and Last House on the Left, a new masterpiece in fantasy terror, Nightmare on Elm Street.
In 1984, the slasher genre was going through a lot of changes, right? A lot of entries being released, direct to video back at the time, releases competing with theatrical releases. And then you had like Friday the 13th was about to call it quits. They didn't. Spoiler. Halloween was pretty much dormant. And I mean, there was a need to get new blood, pardon the pun, into the genre, right? The new life, and that's where Wes Craven, who he is a master, like you said, and he took his unique approach of getting some. His movies always have something, right? I don't know if you agree with me, like something beyond the appeal for gore and violence, right? You look at The Hills Have Eyes, and there's a message there. There's a subtext, right? Even Last House on the Left, to a certain extent. I just watched recently Cruel Summer with Linda Blair. That's a TV movie, but it's kind of like, or it's still a good one. And I think what Wes Craven did once again with the Nightmare on Elm Street, with the original, was take an original, or a story or something you read about people not being able to sleep. Like, I think it was in the Philippines or something like that. And then when the kid from the story finally went to sleep, he died. This was a real story, like obviously with some mental issues thrown in the mix, but it was based on something that he read, and he then took it into 1980s America and made a movie out of it. I don't know if you agree with this approach of the subtext of the original, and also how Wes Craven was able to do something new.
Yeah, I think at that point, because the fallback for the slasher genre in particular was Halloween, so we saw a lot of Halloween rip-offs. I guess you could class them as rip-offs at that point. I think Nightmare on Elm Street was something completely new. I don't think you. I could be completely wrong, but off the top of my head, I don't think we had ever seen a movie quite like that at that point, or at least we hadn't seen a movie like that for some time, because it does harken back to the days of German expressionism, where
Mm-hmm.
it really, yeah, the
Nosferatu
Cabinet
and
of Dr. Caligari, and it really honed in on
okay.
that. And also, just I think with Wes Craven, he has the unique ability to give a voice to those that might not necessarily have it, or he tends to tackle very topical and a lot of social issues, particularly with teenagers.
Yes.
He did it with Scream. He did it with
People
yeah,
from under people under
exactly,
the
and
stairs.
Deadly Friends. And there's a lot of heart and soul in his movies. And I've noticed with Nightmare on Elm Street in particular, everybody had a voice, everybody had a character. Even Rod, like Rod, would have just been the douchey boyfriend in any other horror movie, but
Yeah.
with Nightmare on Elm Street, Wes does point out his fallacies, but also we do get to see that this guy isn't completely bad. You know, he does care. He
Yeah.
does care for
Yeah.
Tina. You know, he is a friend to Nancy, and he's not basically your typical. Yeah,
Anti-Glenn.
yeah, exactly. There is a heart and a soul to Wes's work that I think, even at
Yeah.
that time, it might have been lost in the genre. Like there was a lot of, I guess, thought that horror films are very cynical, and particularly when you put it up against Friday the 13th, I guess it is a fair assessment. But also on the flip side of that, Friday is what it is, and it never makes any qualms about
Yeah.
it's trying to be anything other than what it is. But I think
Yeah.
Nightmare has an ability to really hone in on teenagers in particular and issues. Let's talk like Nightmare 2, Jesse, and the whole subtext,
Yeah.
Jesse coming out of the closet. That
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was very for 1985. That was
Yeah. The
yeah.
beginning of AIDS, the AIDS.
We hadn't seen that before, and I just think for them to have
Yeah.
done that, whether they meant it or not, because they said they didn't at the time, and now suddenly they say that it was intentional. I don't know what to
Yeah.
believe,
Yeah.
but regardless,
Well,
yeah,
we'll cover that one on part two, because I do have some thoughts, and I think the documentary Never Sleep Again shed some light on the subject. But I agree with you, and I mean it's funny how the movie is, or the first one at least, it starts with trying to be. It is original, but also much like Friday the 13th and Halloween, there is an influence of Psycho, right? So spoiler, the apparent lead actress is killed in the first act, or the lead character is killed in the first act, right, Tina? So I think that's kind of like a nod to Psycho. Do you feel that way,
Absolutely.
or
That caught me off guard completely because at that point in time when I saw Nightmare on Elm Street, everyone knew Psycho and that Janet Leigh died in the shower very early on. That was no longer a surprise. With Nightmare on Elm Street, Tina dying, that was a shock. Not just that she died; it was
yeah,
also how she died. It was just very.
very visual, and I think it's the first death in the whole the movie, right? I haven't
Yeah,
seen it in a
yeah,
in
and
in a while. It's she's the
yeah,
opening, right?
she makes it around the 15-20 minute mark, and like that. Yeah,
15, yeah. Not the opening scene, but yeah, I recall that, and I recalled I rewatched the clip. I just didn't know the exact time mark. But yeah, so the original one. I mean, we have an independent studio, the house that Freddy built, like they ended up calling it New Line Cinema, who was known as a distributor. They decided to take a gamble with a well established, let's face it, by 1984, Wes Craven he wasn't necessarily a household name, but he had a lot of solid classics under his belt, and they took a gamble on a horror movie in a time when the genre was declining, like we discussed, was in its decline, like we discussed, and yeah, A Nightmare on Elm Street was born. I mean, we started by commenting on the influence of Psycho, but I mean, overall, how do you feel about the original one? And we can carry on about that surprise effect of Tina being the lead or apparent lead and then getting offed. What are your thoughts on the original one,
I got
1984?
to be honest. I would put it in my top 10, my top 10 horror films of all time. I just think it's a solid movie, and I think there seems to be this idea, or the impression I get is that Wes knew exactly what he wanted to do on that one. I just think because
Hmm.
he had an idea that hadn't really been done at that point, and there seems to be a lot of confidence in the way that the film is executed, and Nancy in particular, she's such a strong lead character, and the cast for the most part is pretty good, and I just think, and the dream sequences in particular are very, very creative. The idea just of Freddy himself. Robert Englund is just such a he's such a powerful presence. I think way more than what anyone could have imagined he would have brought to that character. I just think the entire foundation of
Uh,
Nightmare on Elm
yeah,
Street, it just worked, and it was just one of those situations where I think it just came together better than what anybody could have imagined. And yeah, I just think it's a staple of 80s horror, and I think it really showcased what contemporary horror at that time could do, because a lot of older audiences at that time, they had their idea of horror villains in particular, was Frankenstein's monster and Dracula and the Wolfman and all that. For us, it's Michael Myers, Freddy, Jason. I just think those three in particular embody contemporary horror just perfectly, and they all have something a little different about them. They specifically their personality.
true.
There's something very different about them and their franchises. One is completely individual to the other.
I can completely agree. I mean, I was about to throw in Pinhead,
Hmm.
but we'll get to that later, I
Yeah.
guess, as we get to the right, 1987, when the original Hellraiser was released. I mean, I think the original, we cannot deny that it was amazing. It was a gamble that paid off greatly for New Line Cinema, and also brought Wes Craven into, I guess, the more mainstream, I don't know, vein or landscape or whatever you want to call it. I think the original, like you said, there was some shock values. I think the visual effects were terrific, most of them. So I think the whole tongue with and the mouth and the phone when Nancy's talking. That's amazing. I think all the I didn't know that they actually so the spinning room that they created for the set, so for several deaths, so Tina, namely, like when they designed the room, and even later for Glenn, Johnny Depp's Glenn, um, they then sold the structure to Canon Films for their production of Breaking 2 Electric Boogaloo, which features the scene where the guy's dancing on the ceiling. So they actually sold it. They mentioned that in the documentary. So, I mean, there was, for a studio that was short on cash, they actually, it comes out great. You don't see a low production value there, and building up that or assembling that structure was expensive. I think there are some areas where the movie doesn't necessarily, well, it could be better, but I guess it's the whole arm extension
Yeah.
sequence. But we can give it a bit of some cut some slack there, and the whole running Freddy, which looks like it's not Robert Englund, like when he's chasing Tina. It looks like they hired a kid or something, and he was just like running around.
One thing I did notice in that scene as well is what I like is the way Tina runs. She runs exactly like how you run in a dream, where you feel like you're running fast, but it's as if like you're not really going anywhere at all. I didn't notice it until a friend of mine pointed out how funny her run is, and thought about it. It's like, yeah, why is she running like that? And then I clicked. It's like, I've run exactly like that in the dream several times. Just little touches like that.
Yeah, no, it's that surreal vibe, and I think that works. I was just referring to Freddy's, like when he just gets, and I don't know.
Robert. And the same thing happens in the second one in the shower scene.
Yeah, that there's actually a very good story that I didn't know about the second one. Probably you do a bit of trivia on that one. But I think my biggest, and again, I will put a spoiler notice when I edit this episode. I think the movie works, and like you said, there's a voice. Every character goes beyond their the usual. I guess what was standard at the time, where it's just like unidimensional characters, just like, hi, I'm Fred, and I I have ripped jeans and I like MTV. They actually have a voice. They're not I don't know what standard characters, right? And they all have an interaction. They have fears, anxieties, and that's what the movie is all about. It's all about I guess similar to Blue Velvet, you know, David Lynch's Blue Velvet. It's all about that piece of Americana and the nice lawns and the nice house. But there's something growing underneath, and in this case, it's the community and the vigilante effect. And I think this ties in nicely when you look at movies from the 70s like Death Wish and all that vigilante action, and the 1980s, which is a completely different decade. I guess one way you can look at it, and the way I choose to look at it, it's kind of like, well, we went through some shitty times in the 70s. We did some shitty things. Now it's all good. But guess what? Things will come back to haunt you. And I don't know if the parents actually took action against Freddy in the 1970s. I haven't made the calculations to see if the dates add up, but it's roughly that era, right? So the way I see it, it's kind of like, this is, everything looks nice, but under the surface there's a consequence of your action, and this action is how the vigilante mob ganged up against Freddy. And I mean, I guess they were right, because then we know what Freddy did. But what if they weren't, right? I guess by the time the first one was released, that was still a question mark. What do you think? I don't know if this is too much of a subtext that I'm seeing in a movie.
I actually never thought too much about that, but you're right. And their actions don't directly haunt them; it haunts the generation after them. You know, it haunts their children. You know, that is just brilliant in and of itself. It's very poignant to stuff that we face in society every day. You know, decisions that are made. You know, we say we're going to fix it now, but then, you know, it doesn't ever get fixed, and then years down the track, someone else is going to do it, and by that point, it's just too late to dig yourself out of a hole. And in this case, I think I'm not sure if Wes was directly trying to tap into something there, but knowing him, he probably was because he was very very good at that. People under the stairs. We'll go back to that.
Yeah, yeah. I thought about it after reading an article that a friend of mine, who's not a horror fan, not by a long shot, but he sent me an article about the subtext of The Hills Have Eyes and how it was tackling Carter's America and all about the haves and have-nots and like the polarizing between the elites that live in the city and mid America. And I read that essay, and it made me think, right, and made me look at Wes Craven's movies from a whole different perspective. And I think that's what's so great. And I mean, sadly, Wes Craven is no longer with us, so we can ask him if that was the point. But this is, I think, healthy speculation and just enriches the movie at least, and at least for me. And it's a testament on how strong the movie is. When like I don't think a lot of people will see subtext on Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, but maybe they do. But this like the fact that this is not like it allows you even over what close to 40 years 35 years after its release, people are still debating and talking about it. I think it just shows how powerful the movie was.
It still terrifies like every generation I've seen thus far. Years and years ago, I showed this movie to my best friend Naomi. This movie kept her up for weeks. At this point, we had seen The Conjuring, we had seen Insidious and Dead Silence all in quick succession. Then we watched Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, wow.
Out of all of those films, Nightmare was the one that messed her up. She did not want to sleep alone. She could not fall asleep. I felt pretty terrible for a while there. I honestly thought that this film would have been completely. If she could handle that, I assume she could handle it.
Yeah, this is like an appetizer, like something to ease into, like the end of the night. You watch.
Like, I asked her about it. It's like, what was it specifically that got you? And she said it's Freddy, and the idea that you can't fall asleep, you can't dream. That just terrifies her. The thought doesn't really terrify me. Like I would say the one that terrifies me the most out of the big three is Michael. But Freddy, I have noticed that he is the one that can really get inside people's heads and just mess around in there. And I get it because the concept alone is terrifying, and Robert just takes it like that extra level. It's terrifying. Like, the idea of like a child killer and just it's the glee on his face. It's like gleeful expression. Just whenever he's doing some sick twisted shit. And that's the other thing is Michael and Jason don't talk, and Freddy's got this whole personality. He can be equal parts terrifying. He can be equal parts funny. Like in the first one, he's cutting off his fingers and laughing about it, and then by Freddy's dead, he's flying on a broom dressed as a witch. Yeah, in a hurricane, Wizard of Oz style.
I recall that tribute. Yeah, the first one. Yeah, he already had a voice, but he was more reserved, I would say, with his personality. But we'll get to that tipping point, which for me it's part 3. Just to conclude on, we covered all the great things that were done with part 1. I think the movie gets just spoiled by the ending, and I know Wes Craven was against it. I think it's that clunky visual effect and like Mrs. Thompson getting sucked by the window, and you can clearly see that it's not real. And I think I think the ending. So I just watched American Horror Story, the new one, double feature. So the first 5 episodes, which is like 2 different stories, but the first 6 will cover one story, though the last 4 will cover another one. And the ending to the first part was just terrifying, it was terrible. That's what I meant, and terrifyingly bad. And I think it's all about like that. The horror trope of not being able to write an ending, right? So you got Stephen King, you got Ryan Phillips, and now you got at least not Wes Craven, but this one I think the ending spoils it a bit. I don't know what's your take
Yeah,
on it.
I honestly liked Wes's ending a lot better, the original ending, just because the the ending that they went with, um, the one that Robert Shea, um, I feel like there was this idea that there could be a franchise with Nightmare on Elm Street, and I think the ending that we have now just screams like sequel. I think it
Sequel.
undoes a lot of what the film's message is. You know, confronting your fears, beating your inner demons. I think it's a bit of a cheat as well,
Mm.
because just the idea, Freddy's defeated 1 second and then like 2 seconds later he's back. I mean, I get it. I get it. He is the boogeyman, and I guess it would be hard to defeat somebody like that. But I don't know. It doesn't feel organic like the rest of the film.
Yeah,
It just feels very tacked on for the sake of, at that point, sequels were all the rage, and if this is
yeah.
going to work, then we need to like sort of guarantee a sequel. Just leave a little hook.
Absolutely, and just for the sake of the listeners, Wes Craven's original ending. Your
I
thoughts?
like it. It's simple, but I think that it's a lot more effective in terms of Nancy's arc. I feel like her arc is officially complete, and I think it sends a very empowering message, particularly at that time. You know, I just think the film benefited a lot more from an ending that had a lot more of something to say, as opposed to just killing everybody off and being like, oh, come back next year for the second one. Yeah, we'll be.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, no, I'm with you there. It feels just like forced and very out of place, just like in terms of the execution, it's just why like you have a good movie, like you have better special effects. Some of them are not as great, but still consistent. And then you get that ending where you get this doll sucked up by sucked down through the tiny window, and it's just I don't know. It messed up a bit, but I guess wrapping up the first one, I would just have to say it's the performances that really drive the movie, and we got John Saxon. He's great. Robert Englund again. The fact that he was Freddy Krueger for 8 movies out of the 9 that were made is a testament to his own capabilities, or the fact that he is Freddy Krueger, and it's very difficult to replace. And most importantly, Heather Langenkamp, I think, yeah, her performance, like you said, there is Nancy, and I will get to her in a bit in terms of describing the final girl. I think she just it's very different from what we were used to see, and her performance is great, and I think it only gets better once she returns to the franchise. So yeah, your overall thoughts on the movie, just like on performances. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that everybody stands out on this one, and I think it really comes down to both good casting and also Wes. I think he really wrote, especially Nancy, especially Tina as well.
Yeah.
I liked the dynamic between Nancy and Tina. I felt there was genuine camaraderie there, and I
Yeah.
felt everybody was just a cut above, cannon fodder, and just sort of there to die.
Cardboard, standard. Yeah.
I thought everybody really stood out in this one, and Nancy in particular, who's extremely efficient and resourceful as a final girl.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
she knows, or she learns very quickly that she's in a situation where she can't run away from this thing. So she just says, "All right, fuck it, I'm gonna take this thing head on, and if I die, then I die. But
Yeah.
hey, if I can actually stop this thing, then hey."
Fantastic. No, yeah. I mean, well, I can give you my 2 cents on her as a final girl. I think she's an excellent final girl. Similar to Laurie Strode, right? Jamie Lee Curtis, Laurie Strode, I think. But we with the difference that we get to see her evolution throughout the series, and I think to your point, Laurie, regardless of the timeline, we if it's H2O or resurrection, or if it's the Green trilogy. Um, I think Laurie Strode is a bit, or mostly defined by what happened to her, whether she's a doom prepper or a doomer, or whether she's an alcoholic because of what happened to Michael, what happened in 1978. She's mostly defined by what happened to her, and I think Nancy, it's that capability to fight back, and it's very interesting to see the three times she appears in on the franchise. It's there's an
Absolutely.
evolution. There's an evolution, and I mean, she appears more than your average character in a horror franchise, less than Laurie Strode, but still, it's very very unique, and there's her psyche isn't reactive but proactive, right? The way her character is shaped, in part three, and even the meta angle in part seven. I think it's really great. But yeah, she's definitely like the excellent final girl, and I would say the best I've seen. I don't know if you rank Laurie above Nancy, but hey, this is my
Yeah,
take.
I think for me, Nancy would definitely be up there. You're giving me food for thought. I should rank my final girls one day. I think it would. Yeah, her, Sydney, and Laurie would definitely be up there. Yeah, I think out of the three of
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
Nancy's.
Well, yeah. It's so yeah. I completely forgot that Sydney will now join the ranks by appearing a
You know,
fifth
it's
time
crazy.
in the new Scream, right? It's crazy. And the first one not being directed by Wes Craven, so let's see. I guess it's kind of like the Indiana Jones 5 of the horror genre. Wrapping up part one, I mean, we can't talk about a horror movie without the favorite death and our final rank. You already said that you would rank this as one of your top 10. I would give it a 4 out of 5. Just because it's definitely like a favorite. I wouldn't say it's my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street movie, because of, I guess, the ending spoils it
Yeah.
a bit, but it's pretty much like top notch material. And in terms of favorite death, I think there's no discuss. Well, no debate here. At least I didn't have a debate with myself, or confusion in picking a death. It's Johnny Depp's Glenn, eaten by the bed. The bed then spills out the blood and the TV.
Oh,
I don't
that's
know.
such a. Just still thinking about that. That death makes me
Visual
cringe. For me, it's Tina. Just for me, it's just because
Tina? Yeah,
it,
shocker effect.
it's just the whole concept of the scene in that the final girl not only dies, but it's also the way that she dies and also the way they're able to execute it because it looks incredible. Just it
Yes,
looks absolutely incredible.
it does.
And her acting, like those screams in particular, that scene haunts me. I did have to
Yeah.
wrestle with her death and Glenn's death, but I think in terms of which one impacted me more, definitely Tina. I just thought that entire scene is incredible, and it sets the tone for
Yeah.
the rest of the movie. In that, if this can happen, just wait until you see what we got
Yeah,
planned for you
then
next.
fair enough. No. I guess from an impact perspective, Tina, I guess the favorite one would be Glenn, and it was funny because in the documentary they showed how it actually malfunctioned the whole blood projection. So, and how did they only have one take or two takes to actually get it right, because they would have to clean up the blood and get everything ready for the second take. So it actually, but it works. I mean, it works.
A Nightmare on Elm Street, Part 2. You are all my children now. Freddy's Revenge.
And without trying to rush it like the producers, we move on to Nightmare on Elm Street 2, which was released a year after the original, titled Freddy's Revenge. Wes Craven had nothing to do with it, but producers were keen on milking the cow. And I mean, regardless of the subtext, regardless of the content, I'm not a fan of part two, and I will explain my reasons in a bit. Your take on Nightmare on Elm Street 2?
It's different. I have to admit, I quite like this one, but it's not without being able to recognize just how flawed it actually is. I think there is either an indirect misunderstanding of what the first film was, or a willful intention to just sort of shift it in a new direction and just do whatever, because it does go against a lot of, I, I guess the foundation of the first movie, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Particularly Freddy's motives. I still can't wrap my head around that, but on the flip side of that, I think it's much darker than the first one. I don't think there's anybody particularly memorable in this one. I don't think the cast is particularly great. Like Mark Patton as the lead, I think he's good. I like him quite a bit. I just think it's such a muddled, messy kind of a film, and I think also just the fact that it came out less than a year, or a year almost to the day after the first one, really kind of hurts it, because I feel like this one needed a little bit more time, for them to sort of see what worked and what didn't. And I think without Wes there to sort of guide them along, I think they kind of had to start from scratch and just sort of. I guess that led them to part three, because I think the mistakes they made on this one were eventually rectified. But this is definitely the black sheep. Like this is the one. Like Friday Part 5, Halloween 3. These are all the ones that really stray far away from the concepts, and I don't know. I'm in.
Sure.
I'm in two very different mindsets about this one.
I mean, yeah, yeah. I get your point, right? It's a sequel, but it's too soon to deviate from the
Yeah,
form.
exactly. And I think
Right.
also
It was the
just
second one,
because
right?
the first one ends on that cliffhanger, and the second one doesn't really explain a whole lot of what that was supposed to be. And even though Nancy is sort of meant to be there in spirit, like when they find her diary, just this one is sort of so far removed from the rest of the series. It's very self-contained,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
I just think a lot of people must have seen this at the time and just going, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, I mean it's a good point. I didn't recall the fact that they find, now I do, that they find Nancy's diary, right? But I recall at the time feeling it was a
It
bit
is.
shoehorned, saying, "Look, it's
It
connected to
is.
the original."
That was
Ah,
never a thing.
look,
That was
great,
never a thing in the
fantastic.
first one. So it's just like,
No,
okay, that's kind of random, but whatever.
yeah. And when we never see her writing a diary in the original one, not even. So it's kind of like, yo, Ness, because you just jot down a couple of words here, just for future reference. I mean, I get what you're saying, and it's funny when you mention Mark Patton as a solid lead, because I actually read that three actors that were considered for the role of Jesse were Brad Pitt, Christian Slater, and Michael J. Fox.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you can you imagine? Well, Michael J. Fox, this was 1985, so I guess production started a bit before Back to the Future was released. And let's not forget that year he was in the awesomely memorable movie Teen Wolf. So I think maybe if you trade Teen Wolf for Nightmare on Elm Street, it wouldn't be much of a stretch. Brad Pitt, I don't recall, like, probably, no, he wasn't on Dallas yet, so he wasn't a household name, and Christian Slater was pretty much non-existent as far as the industry was concerned. But it's interesting to see, like, following the Johnny Depp and Kevin Bacon footsteps that they were considering a male lead that would become insanely famous. Um, I think back to why I have an issue with this movie is first of all the effects. Right, you have the exploding parakeet, which hey, the lame matte paintings, which are just I know that then they use the stop motion animation and everything, but they serve the purpose. Here it's just like let's cut some or make some cuts on the budget and just use this crappy background. And I think the other thing is they retain the only thing I don't care about in the original, which is the forced ending with the dream sequence. Instead of a car, you have a school bus, right? And the whole jumping around the canyon and like out of all the things you could have taken from the original, this is it. So those are I guess my issues with part two. It's kind of forced. The plot doesn't really go well anywhere. And I think to your point about the gay subtext, obviously it's now I guess obvious to audiences, but looking at or watching that documentary, you do have they knew what they were doing, right? That's what the consensus is. Like Mark Patton was completely aware. I don't know if it was out of the closet at the time or not. That's irrelevant. But he was aware. Everybody involved in the movie was aware. And I mean, it's very much in your face, right? The whole S&M bar, the shower scene, etc. I think, and it's fine again if it's trying to explore look, this is what it meant to be a homosexual in 1985. Wait, sorry.
No, it's all good.
Just a little. I need to do this. This is what it means to be a homosexual in 1985. In America, fine. I mean, I guess it drives. There is a point, but that's a different movie, and they could use Freddy as a different vehicle or connect that with like dreams or something else. I don't know how I would tackle that, but I mean, I just other than the role reversal where you have Jessie as the final girl, I guess there's not much like going on beyond that subtext. I think the movie lives and dies by the subtext, and the fact that like we're on part two and it's already breaking the rules of the franchise where Freddy shows up and kills a lot of people that aren't sleeping or dreaming at the party. That's already like why,
That's my
right?
least favorite scene in the movie. Um, I think with Nightmare 2, I think I think a lot of people went into Nightmare 2 expecting another film where Freddy showed up in people's dreams and, just killed a bunch of people in very creative ways. And just also the dream sequences in and of themselves, I think they are. I think they get so much more creative with each film. And I think this film doesn't.
With the eye, right? The
Yeah,
eye and the mouth, right?
one
Wasn't
thing
it
I noticed about this
the
film is I don't think there is any scene where anybody dies in the dream sequence or in a dream sequence, except for maybe the ending on the bus. But yeah,
uh doesn't Ron Grady die?
that's when Freddy comes out of Jesse and into the. I think he comes into the real world at that point. Is that true? Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Maybe I recall he was in a there was a mirror or
Yeah.
something. I
So
don't
at that
recall.
point, I think Freddy merges with Jesse. It's sort of like one and the same.
Jesse. Ah,
One thing
okay.
I do kind of commend Nightmare 2 for this because I think what they were going for at this point is that Freddy is a lot more metaphysical as opposed to this actual living embodiment of the boogeyman. So I think with Nightmare 2 you could almost take Freddy as sort of like Jesse. I could honestly believe that Jesse might have been the killer in this one, and that Freddy was just some kind of figment of his imagination. I think he was meant to be a lot more metaphorical in this one, as opposed to quite literally Jesse was having encounters with him, and he was actually real. In all the other ones, I think
Mm.
Freddy is very much real. We know that, but in this one, I think you could almost take it as this is Jesse's story. It obviously you could take it that way. I'm not sure if that's literally what they intended, but this one is a lot more psychological in its approach, and I think also this one with the large cult following it has, especially in the last couple of decades, I think it reached a lot of people at that time that didn't particularly have a voice. So where Jesse's character is concerned, I think this is the one thing that the film absolutely got right. Where Wes Craven also kind of
Hmm.
had the ability to do this, is that Jesse was
Fair enough. Yeah.
somebody who wasn't particularly represented in film at that, especially in horror films. And yeah, I
Hmm.
think that
Hmm.
really holds home to a lot of people's hearts. Yeah, I think Nightmare on Elm Street 2 does have some insanely good prose. I think it's got I think the plot kind of falls apart, especially towards the end. I don't think it's constructed
Yeah.
particularly well, but I would say
Mm.
Mark Patton is definitely the driving force of the film, especially towards the ending when he and Lisa are in the living room. He's covered in Grady's blood, and he's having a complete breakdown. Like that is probably the most incredible piece of acting in this series, in my honest opinion. I think he is honestly the selling point of this film. Even though we don't get a lot of Freddy, I
Oh,
think this film has a lot that you can definitely take it on its own merits in the way that we take Halloween 3 on its own merits, or even Friday 5, or if you really want to go that extra mile, maybe even Jason Goes to Hell. But that's a whole other story.
yeah. Yeah. Well, that one is a
Yeah.
bit of a stretch for me. The last one. No, no, no. I'm with you. Like I said, my issues. I guess plot wise, I don't have the kind of. It's not the plot issues aren't as deep as part five. They're there, but they're not as deep. I think the main issues would be like with the whole visual sequences, like especially the parakeet. I'm sorry, I can't get
Yeah, it's
over
not a
that
good
one.
sequence.
It's not a good one. I think overall, like yeah, Mark Patton as a or Jesse as a final girl. I get it. Like I completely get it. And I think there is some solid acting there if you exclude the dancing sequence. But I also have to say that I had a massive crush on Kim Myers Lisa at the time.
Yeah.
So watching that movie, I was kind of that guy's lucky. She was great, and she had that. I think she was what? So she's a redhead, but very similar
Mm-hmm.
to Meryl Streep, like a young Meryl Streep, right? That vibe. So I think it worked out very well, and she was also very good in that movie. I think as far as my favorite death, like you said, you have a lot of people die at the party, like anonymous party guest number five and whatnot. But I think Ron Grady as takes the. I think in a movie where you have so many anonymous deaths, Ron Grady's is quite visual and I think a solid highlight. Still, I'm like I'm giving the movie a 2.5 out of 5, so like 50%. Like there's still some issues there. There's some evolution, but I not yeah, it's maybe one that I need to revisit, taking into account what we just discussed here today.
It's very unique. Once you sort of, not that you should have to do this, but I noticed with these films, some of the more lesser entries, I sort of went into them with this attitude of like, all right, this is what they are. These are their flaws. So what good can I get out of this? And part two out of all of those ones was the one where it's like, oh, okay, all right, this is interesting. In terms of my favorite death, definitely Grady. That image of the razors coming through the door and Ferris Bueller's dad just sort of
Yeah.
jumping back in absolute horror. It's such a standout image.
Yeah,
I think even though
yeah.
Freddy was very lapsed in this film, I don't know. I think there is some pretty solid atmosphere, and I think that is also accompanied by Christopher Young. Christopher Young did the score for this one. Yeah, and
Oh, okay.
I noticed that the
I
music in this one is just it's terrifying. Like right the first like that first little bar at the beginning, yeah, I was just unsettled right from the get go, and I think he adds a lot to this film that maybe it wouldn't have been as effective for me if it was anybody else, but it just shows even at that time he was going to be like a formidable force in the horror genre. And then he goes on and does Hellraiser a few years later. So yeah,
wow.
I,
I have to pay attention to the soundtrack there. I haven't actually revisited some of some of the soundtracks, but I will. It's actually on my.
A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3. Freddy's just around the corner.
The franchise took a break.
it needed it.
1986, we were Freddyless,
It needed it.
and probably for the best. So, but they returned in 1987 with, and it packed a punch, right? I mean, when you see the kind of talent that was involved in this movie. First of all, full disclosure, this is my favorite one, and I think by 1987, this is when Freddie already had given a voice, and I think that's I don't know, a differentiator, right? Freddie spoke while others didn't, and I guess he gave a voice, metaphorically and well, I guess literally, to other characters, right? You had Pinhead. I know it was adapted from Clive Barker's book, but you had Chucky from Child's Play, so you could start having a new kind of villain with a voice and something to say and some one-liners and punchlines and whatnot. I guess 1987 and Part 3 was the defining moment where Freddy jumped into mainstream
Absolutely.
culture, pop culture, right? I don't know if what's your take on this, and I think that this one is just like we'll get to the talent in a bit, but when you talk about soundtrack, I mean,
I
Angelo
love this
Badalamenti
soundtrack.
did the soundtrack
I
for
love the
this one.
soundtrack to this
Right?
film. You know, the opening credits alone,
Yeah,
as Patricia
I
Arquette,
mean
she's making the paper mache house. It's a great opening sequence.
yeah, to the sound of Dawkins. What was it? Into the Fire. They then
Yep.
recorded Dream Warriors. Dream Warriors. But yeah, this was not the opening song was not recorded for the movie. But yeah, the combination of Dawkins and Angelo Badalamenti, I think it works really well with Part 3.
It does.
So I mean, let's dig in. I mean, Wes Craven did return to the franchise. He wrote a draft, but then it was Frank Darabont and Chuck Russell. Frank Darabont, known because of obviously The Walking Dead, but also Shawshank Redemption, Green Mile, and The Mist, and Chuck Russell, who directed Jim Carrey's Mask, The Mask. They were the ones who finessed the story, right, to make it less darker, I guess. What's
Yeah.
your take? Because I think
There's
Craven wanted to make it like heavier, and they were the ones who made it heavier, but heavier with a meaning. Like, I guess no.
yeah. I think this one takes a lot more. Uh, I don't want to say lighthearted approach, but there is there is a much more I guess crazier out there, maybe borderline goofy at times nature to it. It's very it's just very extravagant in the way some of the dream sequences are constructed. The dream with the snake, and I think also it's that's when they were trying to really hit a much more I guess younger demographic, because you have like a much wider array of cast members in this one, and all with very distinct personality types. And I think at this point as well, this one is where Freddy can sort of be symbolic for all the trials and tribulations that young people can face while growing up. And we sort of witness that in the end when Freddy is attacking them all one by one in various different ways. You know, he sort of becomes a figure of their traumas and basically what is holding them back in life. And yeah, I think that is something that every kid can relate to. I think Freddy could be considered that one person in your life that genuinely, I guess, messes, like, can really cause some damage. But then, you know, we witness, you know, these kids all take him on in their own ways and in their own forms too. So I don't know. I think this one is probably the one that, as a kid in particular, I could sort of look at and go, no, I love this one. Like, this one's for me. The first one's great, but as a kid, like, number 3 was the one for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you there. I think part 3, like you said, it continues. It pushes the envelope, but it sort of continues the tradition of exploring like real concerns and making the characters relatable. Now, I know most of the action takes place in mental asylum, to the lack of a better word, or at least some kind of healthcare facility, if you will. But I think it really, it's to your point, it explores the what's holding these characters back, what's holding these people back, and a lot of people with a lot of real problems. And I think they could, like, I guess people in the audience could relate to what was happening to the characters. At least they knew somebody who knew somebody maybe who was going through that. But most importantly, it's that the beginning of Nancy's redemption, right? She's no longer a high school student. She's now a psychiatry professional who's trying to help, like, those who face a similar challenge like she did in the first movie. And I think that's one of the key things, and what makes, like, this marks a triumphal return of Nancy, her dad, and I guess a whole bunch of new characters. You got a fantastic cast, but at the same time, they became more creative with the dream sequences, and I think they involved Screaming Mad George. And for the special effects on this one, and I think it's fantastic. He has tremendous talent. But also the not the goofiness, but I guess the that sense of humor. I mean, when you have Dick Cavett, they asked him, like, whose celebrity would you like to kill on screen? And he was like, Zsa Gabor, and I was like, oh wow. And I think that's just it's fantastic. The
It's
way it
very
all comes
tongue-in-cheek.
together. Yeah, yeah. And the fact that she agreed, I mean, wow, that's terrific. But yeah, I guess that's all, like, it's really a good movie in the sense that it just explores the myth and pushes the envelope. That's all I can really say. I think beyond that, there are some great sequences, in my all-time favorite moment in the series, Jennifer's death. Jennifer, who
Yeah.
wants to be an actress, and welcome to primetime, bitch.
Just the line, just that is the greatest punchline ever.
I
But
guess here's your big break.
apparently that was like improvised. I'm pretty
It
sure that was
was the original one was "You're on TV Now, Girl." Like that's it was completely improvised. But I guess "You're on TV Now," and the audience would need to understand that her face is smashed against the TV. Welcome to primetime, bitch. Is I guess that's like Freddy 101, right? That's how you define Freddy.
yeah, it's such a
Um,
Freddy thing to say.
yeah, that one was amazing. And I think also Philip's death with the puppet, right? With the whole, like, his veins being ripped
Yeah,
and he's dragged, and Oof. So it's kind of it's very very visual. At the same time, I forgot to mention that I don't know if you know, but on part two, producers were considering to replace Robert Englund, right? And you can only help but wonder if they did, which they didn't, because they could tell it wasn't Freddy, even just after one movie. Like, what would part three be like, right? In terms of having this vocal presence, right? And you can't
Exactly.
help but wonder. I just think this one was it's one of my favorites, like I said. And I mean, you have the soundtrack, the whole the house, like in the opening sequence, is just amazing. And I think Kristen is like pretty much a victim of circumstances and a reflection. She's very similar to Nancy, I think, right? I don't know if you
Yeah,
agree with this, right?
I think even Nancy notices that very quickly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, not beyond being a child of a divorce, but the whole like absence. I think there are some similarities there, and I mean, yeah. Overall, just terrific, and the whole combination and how they explored this movie was like it was back on track, right? I
I think
think.
it was. I think it managed to incorporate what made the original good, and then also bring a new flavor to it because this was the era of John Hughes. Like this film could be almost considered like the Breakfast Club, just Nightmare on Elm Street. And I think that's why it was so easy to tap into a much younger audience at that time. And I think that's why this one holds such high regard to this day because there's a lot of nostalgia to it. Like a lot of people I know, this was their first Nightmare on Elm Street, or it's certainly the one that they remember the most. And I think it's fun. I think this is the one, like this one and Part Four. They are fun. They're just a genuinely good time to watch.
Yeah, yeah, I'm completely with you. And again, back to I think one of the things that make the movie work is the cast, right? You got Patricia Arquette, yeah, Heather Langenkamp, John Saxon back again, Lawrence Fishburne is in it,
Yeah,
right? Very,
yeah.
very Larry
I
Fishburne.
completely forgot about him.
He's
I
there.
just,
He's there.
I loved it.
And
You know,
I would say the yeah, creative, funny, and visual. I think that's the whole combination. But I would have to say that it features the best female cast I've seen in a horror movie in well, at least recent memory, and it's I guess Jennifer Rubin and Penelope Sudrow and obviously Patricia Arquette. It's just it's a killer combination, and I usually, and I'm not the only one. I'm not the pioneer here, but it's also the beginning of the trilogy within the franchise, which is something we see in Friday the 13th with Tommy Jarvis, like part 4, 5, and 6. Halloween, the Jamie Lloyd trilogy, if you will, again 4, 5, and 6. And here with Nightmare on Elm Street, the Dream trilogy, if you will, so part 3, 4, and 5. And I think I haven't finished the Halloween trilogy, I have to say, but from what I've seen so far, and I've seen, well, with the exception of Halloween, all of the Friday the 13th and Nightmare ones, this is the strongest one. I don't know, what do you think? How does it rank this trilogy within the franchise compared to the other two?
I think with I gotta think about this one. Sorry. So I would have to agree with that. I think the Tommy Jarvis trilogy started out very strong, and then it did take a different turn very drastically, and I don't think it was very well thought through. But having said that, Part Six is pretty awesome. So, ooh. And then there's this one. I quite like Nightmare Three. I quite like Nightmare Four. Nightmare Five. We'll get to that. Um,
We'll get there.
Yeah, I think Halloween 4, 5, and 6. Yeah, that's a doozy right there. I think the only really good one out of those three is definitely the fourth one. So I
Yeah,
think, you know what, I'd go Nightmare. I would go
Nightmare.
Nightmare.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. Same here.
I just think between 3 and 4, I thought 3 had a great cast, and I thought 4 had very very notable dream sequences. I thought that was the one where they really got the dream sequences like just right. I
Mm.
thought the dream sequences were both in equal parts terrifying and also very creative. So yeah, Nightmare 3 and 4, like I think they go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
yeah.
just
I mean, yeah. I agree. They all have their black sheep. These trilogies or sheeps,
mm,
in the case of Halloween. But
yeah. It's always
yeah,
good to try something new, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
sometimes
I
it can
think
go a little too far.
yeah, no, I completely agree. I think yeah, part three definitely there was a change there, right? And it's very good. I think I mean looking back at like the movie, I would rank it like within the horror genre as a 5 out of 5. I would say that the favorite death would be Jennifer, like I mentioned. Welcome to Primetime, bitch. As a final girl, Kristen, I find her somewhat derivative of, which is saying a lot for the horror genre, but a bit derivative of both Laurie Strode and Nancy. So I kind of like her, but you know,
Yeah,
she's good, but yeah, just she's no Nancy, and I think yeah, it could be slightly better, but yeah, Patricia Arquette does a great job. What are your thoughts?
great in it. I think she kind of becomes, I wouldn't say sidelined, but once Nancy returns, I think the focus does shift more onto Nancy, rightfully so, because we started
Mm-hmm.
with Nancy, and Nancy has sort of become like a mother hen sort of a figure for all these kids now that are going through the same thing that she did. She has an understanding of what the situation they're in is. She's basically us for them. She has all the information, so I think she's the one driving the story or steering the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Kristen, I think, really takes on that role in the fourth one, but we all know how that goes. But yeah, I think in this one, Kristen sort of goes through an evolution. So they rightfully just sort of they rightfully just sort of keep her over here, and they just allow Nancy to just sort of you know
Own it.
I guess fill in the blanks for her.
Yeah.
As for
No,
my
no,
favorite
agree,
death,
agree.
it's got to be Philip. That's
Philip.
the one death I can't watch. I hate that scene. I I hate veins. I even just seeing that little, I don't like it. It's just it
Fair enough.
grosses me out. So that one death managed to really tap into just the one thing that I hate, and like kudos, like props to them because that's pretty hard to do.
Yeah.
It's not often I'm doing this in a movie.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Covering
yeah,
your eyes during a movie. No, I mean, listen. I think this one is populated with great sequences, like we mentioned, and I have to give a shout out or honorable mention to Terrence's death, like with the needles. I
that's
guess
really
that's
creative.
somebody else. Like it goes hand in hand with the veins. So I don't know how you feel about that one. I personally I'm okay with both, but I know that needles are a major not concern, but something that most people don't like. I mean, just donating blood or blood samples or anything like that. But I think yeah, that one is a tricky one,
Yeah,
but
this
a
movie
great
does.
sequence.
Yeah, this movie does have some pretty creative deaths. Even Nancy's death in the end. I don't know why I didn't call it, but when I first watched the film, I did not pick that was Freddy. I did not pick that Nancy was gonna die. So when the gloves finally, like the razors went into her in the end,
Yeah.
I got the shock of my life. Not quite like Laurie Strode getting stabbed and thrown off a building, but it did take me by
So
surprise.
that's, and that's from Halloween Kills, right? The upcoming movie when she's thrown out of. No, I'm joking with you, man. No. I know that's Halloween
Uh,
Resurrection. I was just like, we've been talking about Halloween Kills spoilers like the whole week, so I'm kind of like, so you're spoiling it by saying that she dies. No, we don't want to know. We don't want to know. This is from the 2002 fantastic entry, which we will cover very soon. Halloween Resurrection. Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. It's because at the time, and I guess like different to Laurie Strode, like when she died in Resurrection, we knew that Jamie Lee Curtis was pretty much fed up with the franchise already. So she, you knew that it would be a bit of a cameo, but here you like, I don't know, unless you read the cast list for the following movies, you wouldn't know that Heather Langenkamp wouldn't be featured in part four.
exactly. I mean, that's because she was pretty much in all of this film, and we were
Yeah,
right at the very end. And again, it's just sort of one of those things where even though I'm angry about it, like they got me. It's
yeah,
it took me by surprise. I don't know how I feel about it still. It's very diluted.
yeah,
But that's the thing with Nightmare 3 is, you know, at least they were able to go some places where it did catch you a little off guard. Like whether it be like the dream sequences, the deaths, or yeah, just even that. Even John Saxon.
yeah.
I wasn't expecting that. The only thing that does drag this one down for me is the skeleton
Oh, the
reforming.
stop animation. Yeah. But
Yeah,
that's something that they also continued to pick up during. I think it's a constant, right? It's consistently present throughout the franchise. You have the
yeah,
whole jumping board on part five, right? At the swimming pool sequence, or part five, and I mean even the bus sequence in part two. It's all done with that. But I think here the whole, yeah, I get the skeleton thing is a bit too much. I'm with you.
yeah. It's a little hokey, but yeah, it doesn't really destroy it for me. Like the whole
No.
movie as a whole, it's like this one I still hold in high regard.
A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4. The Dream Master.
Up until Freddy vs. Jason, Part 4 was the highest grossing entry in the franchise. And I think much of it is the result of Part 3. So Part 4 rides on Part three's coattails. I think
Hmm.
it's a movie, they call it the MTV one, right? Because of the soundtrack. I just think they took what worked in Part 3 and amplify it. And there are some good things about it and some bad things. I mean, what's
Yeah.
your take? You mentioned the fun aspect, and I get it, and it's part of a trilogy within the franchise. But what's your take on part four?
Um. So part four, I often don't know which one that I prefer, three or four, because what I like about four, and I was kind of shocked upon seeing it again a while back about this, but I had forgotten how brutal Freddy is in this one. I had forgotten how genuinely pissed off he was after the third one, because the way he kills the returning characters in not only such quick succession, but in much more progressively brutal ways. It was just like not only is he back, but he's got a fucking bone to pick. I think the general aesthetic of the movie is it's both in equal parts much darker than three, but it's also much more, I guess, zany. I guess
Yeah,
very,
yeah,
yeah. It's very tongue in cheek, and like you said, I'm gonna sort of repeat it. It does work in some small doses. Other things, not really.
yeah,
As a whole,
yeah.
I quite like this one.
It's very interesting because what you mentioned, because I never noticed, like, yeah, I recall that he kills every single survivor of part 3. But never really took on that rage or bone to pick angle to it. And it's interesting because now I may have to rewatch it. I think the movie, like I said, it's the that amplifying without a purpose, right? So you retain some of like Screaming Mad George is back doing some of the visual effects. um, it lacks that involvement, right? And I read something, or no, actually, it wasn't a documentary. Like I heard that Finnish director Rennie Harlin, known for Die Hard 2 and Cliffhanger, and obviously Cutthroat Island, he met
The
with.
Long Kiss Goodnight.
Sorry.
The Long Kiss Goodnight.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Yep, yep, yep. Uh, the Finn man. What was it? The Deep Blue Sea as well.
Yep.
Yep,
Yep.
yep,
That's
yep,
the one.
yep.
And he did one of the Exorcist prequels.
Yes, along with Paul Schrader. I guess separate ways, but still.
Yep.
Um,
Which I have not seen.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think yeah, no. In the documentary Never Sleep Again, they mention like that he met up with James Cameron by chance, and James Cameron asked, "So how are you bringing Freddy back?" And he just replied, "Well, a dog pisses fire," which is actually true. So
See,
that could
I,
yeah, it's zany.
I never got in that scene that Jason was supposed to be like a hellhound. I thought Piss just legitimately brought him back. It wasn't until I read up on the scene, it's like, oh, is that what it was supposed to be? Okay.
Yeah, and
It, did, it, didn't,
I,
it didn't come across.
no, it's just a point that how zany, and I guess there's no real plot, if you will, around this one, or at least there is one, but it gets diluted really fast. And I guess here in part 4, it was a bit of a case of style over substance, right? So I guess we saw Nancy passing the torch to Kristen, and then Kristen to Alice on this one. I think it started to shed some light on the genesis of Freddy Krueger, like who's he? Something we would find out in part 5, and I guess to a certain extent part 6. But the dream, so from the Dream Warriors, great part 3 to the Dream Master, I'm just really not. I don't know. It's like it's like I said, a lot of style over substance, and not much of it. It's believable because like even the dialogue, it sounds like 40-year-old screenwriter thinks he knows how kids talk, and and sorry, this is me talking about like me being petty, but there's no in the beginning when Sheila is talking to the girl with the big hair. Well, they all had big hair, but and she's like, "Oh, I need to copy your homework," and she's like, "Why? Didn't you have time to do it?" No, it was a battle between Dynasty and Homework, and Dynasty won. Fine. Dynasty was no longer a hit TV show, but in 1988, and I have a lot of doubts that a teenager would be interested in watching Dynasty at that point. So it's very like I don't buy that, but that's me knowing a bit about ratings and 80s TV shows. I just think it's like even the martial arts sequence, right? It's just
Yeah, not my favorite.
right. But at the same time, there's like that MTV vibe where you get a soundtrack with Blondie, Billy Idol, Vinnie Vincent, Invasion. You got like big names, uh, and it became like a staple of that trilogy. Was the soundtrack? I just I don't know. Like this one here, it was fun, and I understand why it was a hit. I just think it was a knee jerk reflection of part 3. Oh, part 3 is so good, and people connected with it. That let's go and watch part 4. Right? It's not. It doesn't reflect the total quality of the movie, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think this one again suffers from it came out a year after the last one. I think it's very much by chance that it turned out even half as decent as it did, and I think a lot of the good qualities of the film are also some of its flaws because the dream sequences do really begin to take up a lot of the film in this one.
Yeah.
And some of them are really, really good. Some of them are not so good. I think part three had a much better cast.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in this one there are some good like Alice is a good character, but I just don't. Nobody really sticks out to me as
Memorable.
memorable, quite like part three.
Yeah.
And that isn't really to say that anybody is bad. It's just yeah, I was kind of disappointed that Kincaid got killed off so quickly, and Kristen got killed off so quickly, and I just wish that one of them was sort of around just to sort of drive the rest of the film, because once they're dispatched quickly, I don't think we have anybody from the first three films there to drive the story any longer. It's just this new set of people. And as great as Alice is, I don't think she becomes great until the end, and also part five.
Yeah, she's
Obviously
probably
she
the only
becomes
thing
more of
about
like a
part five. Only
yeah,
part five.
like, she's great in that. But this one, it is very MTV and of its time. Like I think out of all the films of this era, this one is definitely the most dated. But on the flip side of that, Robert Englund as Freddy, I did like that they sort of brought him back to at least semi scary Freddy. Like just I'll never forget um, just the seething amount of rage that he has, particularly with Kristen
Mm-hmm.
in certain scenes. Like normally he likes to toy with his victims in such prolonged
Yeah.
periods of time, but with these three, he wasted no time whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it was just sort of like oh, I'll pick off Kincaid and Joey first just to fuck with Kristen.
Yeah.
He and then not only did he burn her alive. He threw her in the fucking boiler and then let her mother and her friends find her burning,
Yeah.
like just completely engulfed. If that wasn't sending a message, it was just like I don't know what the fuck was. This is where I went. He's really not playing around this time,
Yeah.
and I like the film because of that. Because it's like yeah, this is the Freddy that I remember from the
The
first two.
original. Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I
yeah,
guess
like
I
not
have to
just
rewatch it just for the sake of the opening or the first act where he goes after all the main characters
hmm,
from part three. I think yeah. To your point, maybe I'm being just a bit unfair with it, and I should revisit it and rewatch, even if not the whole movie, but it's not that long. But the first act to get those points you mentioned. I think that's also why it's so great to debate these movies with you, because I always leave with the urge to revisit some of the movies and get your perspective, like because you do raise some interesting points. I never realized that 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 rage in the beginning, and I will revisit.
yeah.
I will, and I'll be in touch regarding that. I mean, you were talking about the boilers, so that's the outcome of the whole beach sequence, right? Where his claws, no, his glove just goes like a shark fin, Jaws style, into the sea.
Yeah. And he puts on the sunglasses with Miami Vice
Yeah,
playing in
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
background. It goes from this is the scene that sums up Nightmare 4 perfectly. It goes from that straight down into the boiler room to Kristen getting thrown into a pit of fire. It's just tonally, it is all over the place, but I think that's part of Nightmare 4's charm, just because it does feel like something out of like a nightmare. It does play with the whole notion of I was never sure of what was real and what wasn't after a while. Like my favorite sequence is when they're on a loop, when Alice and Dan are on like a loop and they don't actually realize it until they start getting like a sense of deja vu. So I could swear we've done this before. Like that was interesting.
Yeah.
The way they were able to play around with the sequences, it was. I thought Part Four did. There was a spark of creativity in it, even if it did lack in certain areas in terms of the
Certain
plot and
certain aspects.
character.
Yeah, yeah, no,
Yeah.
I agree. Visually, nothing to complain, and I guess even the worm and everything was
Mm.
great. I have to say, Alice, she's probably the only good thing about part 5. processing the death, like Kristen's death, before you start caring about Alice, much like you were still thinking about Nancy in part 3 before you start caring about Kristen. That's the way I see it. I think she's just like this
I
child,
agree.
and then stuff happens to around her. That's just it.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree with that.
yeah, in
I
terms of
think out of everybody in this film, I got to go with Kristen's death just because that that was just fucking brutal. And not only that, it was sort of the first time. Obviously, like Freddy's boiler
yeah,
even became sort of like a running joke in the like even the wedding singer makes a line about that. But it was the first time where I think he had killed anybody in such a vengeful, sort of symbolic kind of a way. It was just that whole sequence was probably my favorite sequence of the film.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's also something a pattern that's very interesting. You always or you tend to rank deaths in terms of the impact to the plot. I am more well less cerebral about it, or at least I just go with like
Which one sticks out in my head?
yeah. I mean, and that would be Sheila, the kiss of death. Like when Sheila is like taking the exam and the letters start to jumble around, and Freddy just goes up, kisses her, and sucks like life out of her.
Yeah,
Um,
that I think the most brutal one is definitely the heavyweight girl.
oh
Just
yeah,
her elbows splitting open. That
That's
I hate, but
yeah, no,
I hate cockroaches too.
yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, the cockroach. Yeah, that was also
Oh.
very visual, very visual indeed. I'd say like overall, I will revisit this one. I had given it a 3 out of 5, because it is uneven, but it would be unfair to like just crucify the movie because of sort of its style over substance message.
Delivers A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, The Dream Child.
A lot of franchises were hurting even before, like Friday the 13th. Halloween had made a successful comeback in '88, but by 1989, there was just too much. It was almost kind of like a repetition of the mid '80s with too many movies. And even I think Wes Craven was a bit frustrated with the direction of the franchise. He tried to create a new franchise with Shocker, which obviously didn't go anywhere beyond part 1. Which I mean, I watched it probably 10 years ago, and I think I enjoyed it. I guess, but
It's still sitting up there on the shelf. I have to watch it one day.
oh, you haven't seen it? Oh,
No, no, I managed to get the Scream Factory edition of it, but I still haven't actually watched it.
it's good. From what I recall, it was good. I think it's a movie that's a bit overshadowed by the amount of talent that was put on the theme song. I don't know if the amount of
I did
no, go ahead.
no. I can only imagine though, because yeah, that was when they were really trying to get as much talent on the soundtrack as humanly possible.
You got so I don't know. It's called the Dudes of Roth. So you got Paul Stanley from Kiss. You
I don't
got
know that
Desmond
name.
Child, the producer. You got Michael Anthony from Van Halen. Tommy Lee from Motley Crue. I mean, I don't even know who else is there. But it's just like, and they recorded a couple of songs. Then you got Megadeth's cover of Alice Cooper's "No More Mr. Nice Guy." It's like it's a really good soundtrack. The movie
Oh,
just tries to go a bit like Freddy-ish. So I guess it was Wes Craven's way of saying I'm taking this metaphysical entity again and doing things my way. I just think it's solid, but it came too late in the game, and
yeah.
it's no match for Freddy.
No,
So,
not at all.
but
No,
definitely,
he
Shocker is
dominated.
worth a watch. I mean, if you have the time, I think it's a cool watch, especially just like to get the full view on Wes Craven. I still have to watch Deadly Blessing and the Serpent and the Rainbow. I think that's the one for Bill Pullman.
That's a pretty good one.
So
Mm-hmm.
those are
Yeah, that's a good one.
okay, and Red Eye. Those are the ones I still need to. The three ones I need to watch by Wes Craven just to complete the sequence. But back to part 5. If part 4 may have been rushed, part 5 was definitely rushed. Right, the fact that
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is the lowest point. I'm gonna give you the grade right away. It's a 1 out of 5 because you got the whole situation with first of all, the body count. 3 in a whole movie. It's unacceptable to a horror fan, especially when they're, other than Dan and the motorbike, they're quite forgettable. I don't know what's your take
I
on
was surprised at how tame. So I saw. I still have it as well. I saw the uncut version of the film on VHS
Oh
as a
wow.
kid, and I remembered some of the deaths being really, really brutal. When I watched it last night, I was amazed at how much was missing. When he's killing Greta, in the VHS, he's cutting out her guts and feeding it to her,
Oh wow.
and that was completely missing from this version. And I was certain that that existed. I thought for a second maybe I made it up in my head. I had to look it up. Apparently, the elements of the uncut version are so damaged that we might not actually ever see an uncut version beyond the VHS. So
Yeah.
I was genuinely surprised at how tame Nightmare 5 was on DVD. Like this is the version that everyone got.
Yeah. That's the one I've seen, and I think it's also it's what happened right at that time. You look at Friday the 13th Part 7, released in 1988, a year before, right? And they were trying to push the envelope with more gore, more violence, fine, but the censors just weren't taking it, right? And that's like, okay, we can innovate by making things more brutal, but then you hit a wall where no, you can't do that, and therefore, like, okay, we need to cut it, and it really impacts like that journey. Like I've only known that the fusion between wait, what was the name? The Dan and the motorcycle.
Dan.
Yeah, Dan and the motorcycle. It was more like the Tetsuo, the Iron Man movie. Like the fusion, like man and machine, was far more brutal. And on the documentary, you kind of see it, like the extent, and it works well. I just think that's an issue, but I don't know. You tell me. You've seen both versions. I don't think it would have fixed the movie, right? Because here we have
It doesn't.
Alice. Alice is pregnant, dream child, etc. Um, I mean, there is a plot. There is too much focus on showing Freddy as the son of a thousand maniacs, and the nun character, and there are some good sequences, but overall, I think it's a missed opportunity. Let's disregard part 4 and the lack of clear message there. There was an opportunity to do something more related with pregnancy, kind of like Eraserhead meets Rosemary's Baby for the
Yeah.
80s. And there was a missed opportunity there, right? You would have expected a franchise like that to actually take that opportunity and get a message through. Like, okay, is it really evil, and how can Freddy toy with the whole situation? Like, I think it could have been fantastic, and it could have could have been like outstanding, completely different, and taking that pregnancy experience to a whole new level. Sadly, what we get is just a mediocre, I think, below mediocre movie with that just is a rehash of what made the first 2 elements of the trilogy good. I don't know. Your take.
No, that is a 100% accurate assessment. It gets overly complicated when it doesn't really need to. It apparently this story idea came from the casting director
Yeah.
of the series, Annette Benson. I think it's a good idea. I I think what really hurts the movie is number one, yeah, you've already pointed it out. It's very rushed. It is edited completely all over the place. The directing, the cinematography, it's really really flat. I was sort of shocked at how some scenes just looked boring.
Yeah.
It wasn't. But then on the flip side of that, there was some sequences in this movie that I could tell were really really thought out, and I have to believe that the movie might have actually been built around these particular sequences. I
You're
think
talking about
the
the
death scene,
MC Escher's, like the staircase, like like people
yeah,
walking around. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's very gothic. I think there was an angle, and I think you're absolutely right. There were like we have some ideas of sequences that may work. Let's build a story around it, as opposed to the other way around.
exactly. And it's funny that they should have come out in the same year because Halloween 5 had this exact same problem. It was, all right, we'll just shoot it and just hope that it comes together in the editing. And it really doesn't. The film, it's very, it's almost like a fever dream at times. It jumps all over the place, and like one minute, say for example, Alice is doing one thing, and then the next second it'll cut to her being rode down a corridor on on a bed or something like that, and just screaming. She's in the same position that Freddy's mother was in, and she's reliving what happened with her, and it jumps from one thing to the next with no consistency whatsoever. It's very muddled. It's a mess. Like it really is just a mess. I think they tried to make it work, and it doesn't. It really doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, what's your take on exploring Freddy's background? Does it make it because I think it works, right? I'm usually not a fan of, and we can talk about Rob Zombie's Halloween until the cows come home, but I'm not a fan of knowing. I don't know if you like Rob Zombie's take. I personally not a fan on.
I can take it or leave it.
Yeah, I mean, I think here it just kind of works.
I
And I'm
agree
not
with
talking about part five alone, but exploring Freddy's background. I think it kind of like works. Not sure if I buy into the whole story of how he was conceived, but that's another point altogether. I think that just needs to be like it's vague enough to for the storyline to just evolve either way, but it just gives a bit of context, and I think that's really that's good. I don't know how you feel about like the franchise exploring his roots.
I think because Freddy comes across as much more humane
Yeah,
compared to say Michael and Jason. Michael and Jason, there is a process that is better shown rather than told.
yeah,
Whereas Freddy, because he's got a lot more personality, and I think it makes it much more accessible and to the idea of showing who he was as a person and what led up to this.
yeah,
Maybe not necessarily why he became what he is, but as he was a mortal human being, like I find that interesting.
yeah,
I do find that genuinely interesting,
yeah, yeah,
and I do like the even Freddy's Dead did this. Like I do like seeing Robert Englund as just normal mortal Freddy Krueger because it's just interesting seeing him out of makeup and
yeah, yeah. No, no.
as a I don't know. I just find Robert Englund fascinating in these films. To sort of watch, I like seeing his process.
He is. He.
He's able to be very subdued
Yeah,
as a human, and then he can be very obviously terrifying as the Freddy Krueger we know,
yeah.
but also very funny.
He,
So
yeah,
to
yeah.
see him subdued, it's it's equally in parts terrifying, but also there's something alluring about it.
I completely agree, and apparently, if you see the documentary "Never Sleep Again," he's a little chatterbox. So they show him like apparently it was difficult to get the makeup on because he kept on talking. But not about horror movies. He was just talking about his like experience, like funny stories and anecdotes. And they have like a sequence where he's just like, and then I met this actor, da da da. But he was like kind of whoa all over the place. And you're like, wow, he's genuinely a nice guy. But again, back to part five, and to a point you raise about editing. I think we never expect any of these movies to be nominated for best editing, but this one is particularly bad. And I just noticed that scene where somebody is there and like the next cut, they're no longer there, just like 5 seconds later. In the beginning at the
Yeah,
graduation, and it's a sign when you notice like background characters. It's a sign that there's not much going on so that you can pay attention to the small details. But
I think that graduation scene. I think that is another heavily edited scene that
yeah,
was actually featured in the VHS.
yeah, with the
Because
tickets and everything.
yeah, someone's got a camera or something like that,
Yeah,
and then in the
camera.
next shot they don't have it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's very very choppy. With part five, the one thing I will say is I hated this one so much as a
yeah.
kid. Like this for me was my least favorite.
I've only seen it
It's
once.
jumped up. This is my second time. I should point out I haven't actually seen this film since 2007. So, and I was 11 or 12 at the time.
Hmm.
So, seeing it again, just completely fresh in my mind. There are things I like about it. I think it's much darker in terms of aesthetic. It's almost for me as dark as part two was in a very gothic.
Yeah.
There are moments where I honestly, because Hellraiser and Hellraiser 2 had come out in 87 and 88 at this point.
Hmm.
And I feel like Nightmare 5 was taking a few inspirations from those films, particularly like the chase scenes in the corridors at
Hmm.
the end with Freddy and Alice, like the way it's shot, it's very Hellraiser. I like that it's they went for something a little darker, even if the script didn't really reflect what they were trying to do. At least I can sort of look at the film and go, "Oh, that's a cool shot." You know, that set design is really really cool.
Yeah.
You know, it looks like a Nightmare on Elm Street film. It sounds like Nightmare. It's just it's not
It's not the
written.
full experience.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
it's sad.
yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of potential.
There was, and I think the concept again, like I said, of pregnancy, you could incorporate it with the Freddy's take on it, and it could have been better.
Mm.
Now, that being said, I think there are a lot of aspects that they try to recycle that just simply don't work. First of all, the soundtrack that just tried to reflect 1989 with a mix of hip hop and heavy metal, or new wave British heavy metal with Iron Maiden's "Take Your Daughter to the Slaughter." No, "Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter" and Cool Modi's right, track.
I did notice there was a lot of hip hop in this one. I did notice
There
that.
was, and even what was Freddy's rap or something like the closing track.
Oh, I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, and let's keep it like that. Sorry to dig this up. Let's bury it like Freddy, and his glove. I think yeah, that's like there's that point with soundtrack, but also with the lack of that the body count needs to be creative and needs to be different. I just think here they went with three, and maybe they were heavily edited. Uh, I know they were, but maybe that's why they just simply don't work. And the fact that you only have three makes it even worse. And I guess yeah, here I don't know. Alice is okay. She gets like like in the context of part five, she's great because she's probably the only thing I really, or one of the few things I enjoy about this movie. In terms of favorite, that's I guess we'll have to go with Dan because by default, you can't really pick a better one here. I think, and I give this a one out
I
of
agree.
five. That's
Yeah, I definitely agree with Dan. I just think that this movie needed a lot more formation because I don't understand what exactly the story is. Maybe I missed it. I just I don't know what exactly Freddy is trying to do. Like I get what he's trying to do in part six, even if it's still stupid. But with here, I don't know if he's trying to come into the real world or it just seems like a hybrid of part two and yeah, like yeah, yeah. It's just it's very unusual, but
What's with kids today, huh?
Freddy's Dead. The final nightmare.
Great graphics.
They saved the best for last.
I guess as we entered the 90s, there was you still have a couple of decent slashers like Doctor Giggles. I like that one. It's a nice one.
Candyman.
Candyman. There you go. But the producers were trying to figure out what are we gonna do with the franchise, and I guess by the 90s, what happened was let's end with a bang. I think Halloween failed to do that. Well, from what I've seen of part six, but the fact that they had to do part seven just a few years later and discard the whole timeline leads me to believe that part six didn't quite nail it. Then you got Jason Goes to Hell, which we covered in the last episode, and well, the least said about it, better. And then we get Freddy's Dead, the final nightmare or the last nightmare, right? Part 6
Mm-hmm.
and this was the first franchise to officially kill it or end, and I think they actually did it because New Nightmare is different, like meta, like alternative timeline. Freddy versus Jason, you can argue that again, different timeline, and that's it. So I think 1991's Freddy's Dead. I go against the mainstream opinion, and I actually think it's quite good. It impressed me when I watched it. And before I jump into it, I don't know. Well, you know about this, but I was actually reading about the original plans for Part Six uh, when they hired Peter Jackson, right, to write the first draft, and it was the Dream Lover. I don't agree with the title, but they explored the meta aspect, right, slightly. The meta aspect of the series, where teenagers would take pills to go to dream and beat Freddy, right? Which is because he was no longer scary. And I guess that's a bit of the state where the franchise was at. People were no longer scared of Freddy. So I appreciate the meta documentary, the meta commentary, sorry. But I still prefer part six as is. And I saw the ratings, and back then I didn't realize how poorly received it had been, even by fans. And I don't know what's your take. You don't seem to be a fan of part six.
Um, I watched it again
Yeah.
last night. I watched part five and six back to back just because I hadn't seen them in so long, and I kind of wanted to see in quick succession where my mind was at with both of them today. With part five, one thing I noticed very quickly while watching it was that I was going very easy on it. I was just sort of going, all right, this is where we're at with this film in the franchise. Like, obviously, there is some issues here, but I'll take with the good with the bad. With part six, it was a little harder to do that just because with part 5, what I liked about it was that at the very least, it was the visuals were very striking. It was a very
Yeah,
gothic kind of film where I was just sort of able to go, all right, I like the look of this. With this one, it's not particularly scary, and
no,
but on the flip side of that, it's very it's pretty fucking goofy to the point where I just kind of had to go, all right, this is kind of fun. I can't say it's the worst thing I've ever seen. It's fun. It's enjoyable in its own little way.
yeah, yeah,
Again, this is probably like the one where it's probably one of my least favorites um, with the remake. But on the flip side of that, I can't say that I hated it wholeheartedly.
yeah,
It is what it is at this point. Like it's been 30 years, and
yeah. Actually, yeah, 30 years. Yeah, wow.
so I think at this point, it's just there's no point in me trying to like wonder what could they have done differently. It's just all right, fuck it, just give it to me. Just
Sure,
whatever I get out of this, I'll take it.
sure. I understand. I think for me it was the whole let's try to tie up the loose ends and deliver something. And there is like the plot twist was interesting ish. Like I guess the reveal. 3D, not fully sure if it appealed to people, and like the Freddy little demons flying by. I that's a bit too kitsch for my taste, but it is what it is. I think the when you talk about like there's nothing really terrible about the movie. I think 3 words or 4 words come to mind: Tom, Arnold, and Roseanne. Their cameos, the 4 little words that will scare you. I think, yeah, that was. I know that they were popular at the time, but why? Um, yeah, I think on the other side you have that humor that became a staple of the show of the series, and very good cameos, right? You got Johnny Depp, your brain on drugs, which was good and enjoyable. Alice Cooper as Freddy's dad, um, and one of the greatest, I think the goofiest or funny things, the map saying "you're fucked."
That's one of my favorite. That's probably my favorite joke in the entire franchise.
That was
That
is a good one, and even like it's just the movie screams 90s, right? Even with the Twin Peaks reference. Like,
I noticed that.
yeah,
I noticed that. So I sometimes forget that this one was filmed in '91,
yeah,
and by this point, I don't know why I associate Nightmare on Elm Street with like just the '90s.
yeah,
Sorry, the '80s.
yeah.
So
It is.
when I see this one, it's just on the brink of like the early '90s. So,
Yeah,
oh, okay. There's quite a few pop culture references going here that I actually get.
yeah, and even the now I'm playing with Power, the Nintendo glove, which Nintendo didn't officially allow the usage of the glove.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Which yeah, no, they didn't, but yeah, it was supposed to be a Nintendo like product placement there. I think it's very very 90s, and at the same time there is it comes full circle. They it's just good to see like the whole sequence and to see like Freddy becoming Freddy. um I would say, yeah, overall good. I enjoy it. Iggy Pop's final song is great. I think good good cameos, with the exception of those 4 words I mentioned. And I think Maggie Burrows kicks ass. She's no Nancy, but she's definitely like, I do enjoy her performance, her character's performance. Sorry. I think she's. I won't reveal the other name of the character, but she's great. I really enjoyed. It's more of a '90s feel, like what you would see on Scream, maybe. I don't know, with Sidney Prescott. Maybe I'm
Yeah,
pushing it
I
here.
get that.
I just seem to equate both of them. When it comes to favorite kill, now you're playing with power. Now I'm playing with power. I would say with Spencer Breckenmeyer's character killed in the 8-bit video game. It's silly, but does a trick.
I do like that death just because it made me laugh. Just him bouncing around
Yeah,
the living room like that. Yeah, that was where I went. You know what? I give up. I'm going to enjoy this. I'm not going to sit here and just pick it apart.
Yeah.
It is what it is. I'm going to enjoy it. But I think my favorite has got to be the spike bed.
Uh-huh.
Just because that image of Freddy pushing the spike bed out on the road like Wile E. Coyote. It's so stupid, but it is so funny. This is where it officially crossed into that Looney Tune territory, and it tickles my sense of humor. So it was hard for me to sort of go
very serious.
It's not like I'm not really. It's not like I'm not enjoying this.
Yeah, it's a different route.
Yeah, so I have a really goofy sense of humor, so it's really hard for me to look at that stuff and not kind of appreciate it on some level. I get why horror fans might not appreciate it or care for this film at all, but whatever.
Yeah, no, I get the point. I think here they had nothing to lose and they would just go through everything and the kitchen sink, just add it. And I think, yeah, it worked. And the fact that there was no need for a direct sequel to this one is just shows that I think the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise did very well in terms of consistency, if you exclude like some of the lows, because there was no need for let's create a different timeline and let's ignore this and that. Like, they don't necessarily ignore, they build, I guess. And that's what happened in 94 with part 7, right, which saw Wes Craven coming back to the director's chair. And this is kind of like, it's almost a standalone entry, right? It's almost like a spin-off, because I consider it canon, but at the same time it's very, very different. I mean, it's Wes Craven did it again, right? Twice, with the same franchise, which was to inject new life into a dying genre. And here it was the meta approach, which Peter Jackson tried to, or at least in his screenplay, there were some hints of that. But this was something that was a springboard to the immensely successful Scream, right? Also not written by Wes Craven, but directed by Wes Craven. And I think this was the reason why it failed. I think there are two reasons here. First, the audiences just weren't ready. There was a big backlash towards the franchise. It's like, yeah, you can change, but the name, it's still Freddy and Nightmare, right? And I think also the fact that Wes Craven never asked Johnny Depp to star in it, I think there would be a risk of making it a Johnny Depp vehicle. At the same time, I think more people would have watched it and appreciate the brilliance of the movie had Johnny Depp starred in it. And he went on record saying, I would have done it.
Yeah. I mean, he did part 6, yeah.
Yeah, well, a cameo, but he wanted to an extended role on part 7. Like, that would have been great.
I think Wes went on record stating that he felt, Johnny might have actually said no to it.
But
I was kind of humbled by the fact that Johnny would. He's many times over the years talked about the series and shown immense affection for it.
Yeah,
like even talking about his death scene on, I think it was Letterman.
Yeah,
and it's really, really nice to see actors that have come such a long way in their career that started out with their horror days.
Yeah,
just look back on that and go, you know what? Yeah, that was pretty good. I had a pretty good gig.
You don't see Leo DiCaprio talking about Critters 2 or 3.
No, I'd be shocked if he even remembers it at this point.
You posted something about an actress that forgot that she was on Urban Legend, right? Final Cut or something? No?
Yeah, Loretta Devine, she forgot that she actually came back for the second one. She noticed that everybody else at the time was suddenly like, with the new Scream film and all that, everyone's suddenly getting sequels,
Yeah.
and someone had to remind her, it's like, oh, you already did yours.
Wow.
Yeah,
No, I mean, yeah, I guess it's humbling to see that Johnny Depp still appreciates the well, he knows where he started, or he recalls where he started, and I mean, I think yeah, there would be a risk of making it a Johnny Depp movie, but I think Part Seven, as is it's great. I mean, you have. It seems like everything worked at the movie, like in so many layers. You had the California earthquake, and they got the footage, like, and they were able to. It was already part of the script, and they were like, "Oh, great, fantastic." Then you got the whole. We need to do a new Nightmare movie to get rid of Jason, to get rid of Freddy. Sorry, and I think even the whole Freddy's no longer scary approach, the fact that Freddy looks different and is different in this one, it's kind of like, I don't know, everything just really works, and I'm really sad that it wasn't a hit and that it hasn't been seen by more people, because it's really, it is what defined the 90s. It started there, in terms of horror and slashers.
yeah. I think this, as you pointed out, it was something that was a little bit maybe too much for people to get on board with. Obviously, by the time Scream came out and that whole era of slasher film, like postmodern slasher films, really began,
Yeah.
this one sort of began to get a lot more. In terms of retrospect, it was much more appreciated.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it's definitely unique, and it's definitely a Wes Craven film. Like this is, even though Nightmare on Elm Street may have definitely strayed far away from what he created, and as such, maybe it formed its own identity as opposed to like a Wes Craven sort of identity. This
Hmm.
one brought it back, and maybe some people weren't a fan of that. It may have been subconsciously considered, a retcon of the series evolution at that point. But I think that was consciously the point. It
Yeah.
was just like, because I think even Wes Craven admitted that he watched the series
And he couldn't.
up to that point just to see where it was at, and he just couldn't follow the story at all. So
Yeah.
I sort of appreciate it. Was also him, basically saying like thank you to fans.
Yeah.
There is a very deep rooted sense of, I wholeheartedly thank you, because he's even spoken many times about how Nightmare on Elm Street sort of helped put him on the map and sort of guide him along to the career that he had subsequently had since then. Because he was having some issues at that time, like his career wasn't really going places, and Nightmare was just so embraced. So I get the feeling that when I watch New Nightmare, that this film is just sort of him like embracing all of us and going like, you guys are just the fucking best. Like, thank you. Like, just thank you for everything.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's never thought of that movie from that angle. I mean, yeah, you said it all. I think it's a really a love letter to the fans, and also, look, this is something different, something unique, and I'm not gonna mess up with the timeline. Maybe because he couldn't follow it, but I think it's also shows like the extent that it it took something that was already established and that fans and mainstream would consider to be outdated by the mid '90s, to actually bring something new to the genre and actually influence what we would see throughout the rest of the decade. And I think he did that on with the Scream saga. I'm curious to see what they do with Scream 5, because all of them have a point, right? Scream 1, the horror tropes; Scream 2, the sequels; Scream 3, the meta; Scream 4, the reboots, right? I don't know what they will do with Scream 5, but let's see. And I think he yeah, it's more than thank you. It's really, let's take this forward, consciously or unconsciously. That's the impact and the legacy of the movie beyond its 90-minute or 100-minute duration.
Yeah, I think out of the original 7, this one was sort of able to end the series on a high note because at that point, I don't think any of the, I don't think any of the 3 big franchises ended on a particularly good note.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that Nightmare did better than the other 2.
Yeah, Jason Goes to Hell, Halloween 5. Whoa.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I haven't seen Hellraiser is one that I haven't explored properly, like other than 1 and 2, but I don't hear great things. Same thing with Children of the Corn. But I guess at that point you also had Child's Play still somewhat active, but part 3 is a bit of a goof. Well, it was always kind of goofy, but part 3 was, yeah, the military school was a bit.
Yeah, that one's pretty out there. I enjoy it, but
Yeah,
it's pretty goofy.
yeah. So I mean, we did cover Freddy versus Jason when we talked about Nightmare on Elm Street. When we talked about Friday the 13th, I think we can jump at the reboot and what to say. Like, I went to see it 11 years ago for the same reason I went to see Rocky Balboa and Rambo 4 and the Friday the 13th reboot in 2009. You know, to experience in the big screen something that I've already experienced in the small screen. I knew it wouldn't be the same. I was aware of it, but it was, for me, an opportunity and a statement. And of course, I guess, with the exception of Rocky Balboa, maybe I don't recall. I always left the screening room disappointed, and I think the most disappointed I've been was with Nightmare on Elm Street 2010. Like, gone is Robert Englund. We got a good cast, but to be honest, it's so shit. The movie is shitty. Like, the costume, the references to the original series, which are less than subtle, and it's less than a homage and more of a ripoff. Even the only interesting thing they could do with the movie, which was, what if Freddy wasn't guilty? What if he weren't guilty? And he's actually, yeah, just like, kind of like Mads Mikkelsen's character in The Hunt, like, wrongfully accused. And they could have played that, but they didn't. Then they pretty much get this exposition sequence. Oh yeah, no, he not only killed the kids, he's actually a child molester. Okay, cool, settled. So we got it coming. So that speculation, that tension is out the window, and in a very simple sequence. And I mean, I dislike the movie, and that's all I'm gonna say about it without becoming a full official hater.
Yeah, with this one, I do remember when it came out because this was in an era of high school
Yeah,
where me and friends were finally old enough to be able to go and see these kinds of films. For whatever reason, we didn't go to see this one, but I did get a copy of it, and we all sat around in class one day. Basically, it was the end of the term, and class, we had no work to do, so we would just sit around and watch movies.
yeah.
One day, we sat around, we put this on, we turned it off. We turned it off. Until today, I had never seen the ending, so that was something new. I just think this one it's a hybrid of several very good writers, and it's basically putting together several different scripts, and the results are, it makes no sense. Like, there's no sequence of events at all. It's literally just one scene after the other with nothing sequential about it, and there's no character development, there's no tension, there's just it's flat, there's nothing. It has a great cast, and still everybody is terrible,
Yeah.
and it's just because of the script. It's just because of the script. The only thing I could say about it is I like the micro naps. there was some, even though the film didn't have any tension, there was some jump scares that did get me, just because I thought that was really creative. So, all right, that's a new angle. Uh, I want to say Nightmare 5. I think one of them did toy with that idea. I'm not 100% sure. But this was something that I thought they explored a little more, and that was new. Other than that, there's nothing. I got nothing out of this.
Yeah, no, it's like, but it's exactly like the name suggests. I was about to bring this up. Micronaps are probably the micro improvement or addition that this movie brings to the whole series. Other than that, there's nothing new about it. And granted, Friday the 13th, the remake, the reboot, remake, whatever, it doesn't add a lot. Like, it just mashes a lot of movies and together. But it's more plays the nostalgia card, right? Look, we are actually now being able to show you more nudity, more violence, more gore, and that's what the franchise, I guess, to a certain extent, is about, and what they're trying to push. Here, there was really a great opportunity to do something to start, and I'm not saying a whole new franchise, but to do something with say 2010, like with the new reality, like new landscape, social media challenges that teens face, like even say what they tried to do with Carrie 2 and Carrie the reboot, like the whole bullying situation, cyberbullying, social media, even the question of accusation without evidence, right? And let's just say that for the sake of the timeline, the parents did kill Freddy or burn Freddy and kill him in the 80s, right? So the absence of research or tools for people to research and make up their own mind weren't as widely available as they are today. You could then accuse our current situation with excess of information, but I think this would be a great balance, right? The kids with a lot of knowledge and or access to knowledge versus the parents who, well, he's guilty, let's do it. I think that would have been a great conflict, and the fact that Freddy became what he became because he wasn't, like, it's almost like taking a new a refreshing approach. This time Freddy isn't guilty, or he
Well,
was
that could have been interesting.
right now. They toyed with the idea, they didn't do anything about it, and that's what I think. Like, yeah, the micronaps, some okay visuals, but overall it's just it's a bit of a mess. And that brings me to a point I'd like to discuss with you, which is, we've seen multiple timelines, and that seems to be the card that Halloween likes to play. We've seen let's put Jason into crazy scenarios, like going to hell, going to New York, which is not very different. No, I'm joking. And or going to space, to outer space. Sure, never been. But we with with the Nightmare series, is that I think the interesting thing is that they always kept it consistent, and once it's done, it's done. You haven't seen, it has the least number of entries, and they tried to reboot it, didn't work. Cool. I just don't think another reboot will do it, and I don't really know other. I know that they're preparing HBO Max TV series. We already had a Nightmare on Elm Street TV show, which aired on syndication, and I didn't hear great things about it. But I don't think they can reboot the show, the series. I think it's like Friday the 13th, maybe. I don't think they can do anything with Freddy because he's so iconic. Because the series, it's the least flawed of the three. I don't know. What do you think? And if you think they could retake it or reboot it, which direction would you like it to go?
I'm sure it's possible, but I think the task of doing it is just really insanely difficult. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that, falling back on what we were talking about earlier, Robert Englund sort of standing out amongst a lot of the franchise icons of the 1980s. I think his success for that was because he had so much personality. Robert Englund just brought so much to Freddy. And I think without him, I just don't think it works as well. I think he is Freddy. He
Yeah.
is that character. You can get any. It's very. It's much easier to find somebody that could portray Michael
Or
or
Jason.
Jason. Yeah, I mean, both of them have a very specific style about them, like especially the walk
Yeah.
and the body language. But I think it's much easier to do that as opposed to say find another Robert England or find somebody that could do what he did and do it well.
Yeah.
I think that's where they're stuck. I think Jackie Earl Haley was a good choice. I just don't think he was given the material that ascertained his talent because he had just come off Watchmen at that time, and
Yeah.
it just didn't. It just fell apart. I think it is definitely possible, but they would really need to be putting in a lot more effort than they did on this one.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and let's assume that they do get a good candidate to play Freddy. Let's say Pete Davidson. No. But if they do get a good actor, like where would you like to see the series going? What could they do differently? And I'm not asking like write a screenplay, Liam. Come on. But what could they do that would be like wow? This is like it's builds upon the legacy and it takes it forward.
I have to be honest. I would like to see something a little bit more along the lines of maybe Nightmare 2, where it's more character based as opposed to maybe not say Freddy is like a metaphor for I don't know, a certain kind of subtext, like whatever's going on in that person's life at the time, but more. I think I'd like to see something a little bit beyond just the Elm Street children, and I know it's in the title, but just I don't know, something a little bit more character based, a little bit more character driven, where Freddy does serve a purpose. He is there for a reason, and he is there. You know, he's not on screen for just maybe a few seconds, but something a little darker, something a little bit more grounded, something a little bit more. Maybe something a little bit more along the lines of New Nightmare. Yeah, just something.
Yeah.
It's same with Friday the 13th. We've seen it done many times at this point. You don't want to fall back into the same pattern of repetition that they did back then, and it's why they ended the franchise when they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, something along the lines of New Nightmare. Definitely something like that.
Nice. I mean, I would like to see a kind of approach similar to what they're doing now with Halloween. I mean, maybe I'm talking too soon because we haven't seen Halloween Kills and Ends, but well, I guess we did because we all watched the trailer, so we already watched the movie, but we haven't seen the last one. But I think kind of like a trilogy would make sense for me, and picking up on your point, just like having an original, not too much of look, this is Freddy, this is his story, but playing on that ambiguity. Was he guilty? Wasn't he? Then I guess on the second one, you would build on that he's actually trying to manifest himself through someone and representing fears, anxiety, whatever. So kind of like part two. And then I would think the final one would be part five done right. And you can have like a common character tying up all three movies. This is the structure I would like to see, like an agreement between like three movies. Maybe it's even the mini series if they want to do it at HBO, but this is like what I would like to see. Like each movie kind of different, but tied down to a larger story and tied down to the franchise. Obviously, yeah, wishful thinking because then they would milk a part 4 and 5 and 6 and whatever. But this is how I would like to see it, and I'm with you. Taking perhaps because I think a reboot and a remake they should improve what was done, or what was done and what wasn't well done, right? So in this case, we would focus on how can we flesh out the qualities and what could have been of the franchise lows, and tie it down to a story. That's at least my take.
No, I agree with that. I feel like there is, especially because of Nightmare on Elm Street, there is just so much potential utilize, because it's not just set in the real world. There's this whole other reality beyond their own that they do explore a lot in each film. But yeah, I feel like you could go a little bit more beyond that. I feel like there's a lot more room to explore some avenues that have yet to be explored. And I also think that Freddy needs to go back to being Dark Freddy. Obviously keep his whole personality and wit in check, because that's, I think, another thing that made the remake not so successful is he's so to the point, and there's just no. He isn't any different to just your straight faced killer in a movie of the week type of thing. Robert Englund really had that personality down check, and he had a few one liners in the early ones here and there, like you've got the body, I've got the brain, that kind of stuff. But, just take him back to what people found scary about him in that first one. Take him back to the reason people are still having nightmares about him when they see that first movie.
Agreed. I think that will be the whole concept, and also tying it down, like we both agreed on the like what can Freddy represent, right? And I think it's difficult, right? Not nowadays. It's I mean, we have a lot of things that we may be scared of, but I think definitely, and not to say that audiences have changed, but they kind of did, right? You, and not in a bad way. Not saying that they're more or less sophisticated, but we've seen a lot, right? I recall my parents telling me how Alien was scary, and it was, but Ridley Scott cannot, like, I don't know how many more sequels he'll try to create, but they can't really capture that essence, right? Not anymore. And we've seen a lot through Saw and Hostel and everything. Like, we've seen the gore; it's been there. So it's very difficult to try and create something new. And I guess that's where the challenge sits. Not only great casting and trying to find someone as charismatic, because it's very interesting. I recall watching V, the TV series with the aliens, right? With Reptile and whatnot. And seeing Robert Englund there, and he's kind of like a meek character. And this was like a year before Nightmare on Elm Street, and the guy's like transformed just for the role, right? It's very very interesting, and I think he's difficult to replace. To your point, but yeah, assuming you can do that, it's all about that connecting and trying to think about what is still scary. Like what was scary in 1984 that's still scary today, and what wasn't around in 94 that's scary that exists today, and that's new, right? And try to establish that. I think those, like a Venn diagram, and in the middle you find what will Freddy represent that will connect with both new and old audiences, and take the franchise into a new direction whilst getting that tie to the original vibe. But maybe I'm overthinking it, or I should sit down and write these ideas myself. Easier said than done. Yeah.
No, it's possible.
But let's see this. What will happen with the HBO Max project? I haven't read much about it, but let's see. I'm keen to see the new Evil Dead, and obviously the new Halloween movies this year and next year. Yeah, I mean, and try to see. I haven't seen Candyman yet, but that's on my list. I mean, between now and until we record our Halloween podcast, what's on your watch list, if I may ask?
Definitely Halloween. Candyman. That's coming up next. I'm hoping they release it here soon.
Oh, it hasn't been released there yet. Okay, cool. Oh yeah, because lockdowns and everything.
Theaters are supposed to open back up, I think, after September 30th. So fingers crossed it's still in theaters. See, other than that, I know A Tale of Two Sisters is on my list next. House, I think it's a Japanese horror film. That's coming up next.
Which one? Sorry.
So, I think it's called House.
Oh, Hausu, like they say in Japanese.
Yes.
That. Oh, I've seen that one. That's yeah. No, sorry. Yeah, I was thinking maybe that. I don't want to sound ignorant. No, I've seen that one. Nightmare on Elm Street 5 for vibes, but you gotta see it. I mean, you gotta see it. It's an experience. Let's leave it at that. I watched it as part of this like bad movies, kind of like Mystery Science Theater 3000. It's something that I used to do with some friends, and we call it Troll Fest because it started with Troll 2. And we watched Hausu 1 year, double feature, so Hausu and Star Crash with the David Hasselhoff Star Wars ripoff. So
I know I've heard of that one.
yeah, but Hausu is great, but prepare for it's crazier than it is scary, I would say.
I'm really looking forward to that now.
No. It's good. It's even on the Criterion Collection. They select, and they're very like snobbish, I guess, or let's say they have criteria for the horror movies that they select. I mean, I was thinking about. Oh yeah, I got a couple of horror movies lined up. So Edge of the X, which I don't have high hopes for this one, but it's on my list. You've seen it.
I've heard of that one.
Yeah?
I've heard of it.
Okay.
I know Arrow just put a release of it out recently.
Raising Cain with John Lithgow, a Brian De Palma movie.
Yeah, I've heard of that one too.
Yeah, let's see. I'm just flicking through. I'm not gonna go through all the items here, but it's good. Chiller and Brain Dead.
Brain Dead. Another one I haven't seen.
Yeah. And what else here that may be good? Nah, that's pretty much it. And other than the Wes Craven movies I just mentioned. But there is this Japanese one I want to watch, Virus. But I think I'll give it a bit more time because it's all the lockdowns are still too close for comfort.
No, I feel that.
So yeah, that one and Outbreak, I'm like, they're parked. But yeah, a couple of them that I would like to watch, and obviously Halloween 5 and 6 before before our next episode, which is hopefully we will record it less than a month away. Hopefully, once we both have the chance to see it. I would say yeah, definitely that's on my list. I won't watch Halloween 2, Rob Zombie's one, because no, that's the one that will always be like not filled out in my letterboxed franchise page. But
yeah, I get that.
We'll have a chance to cover that one in the next episode. So, man, again, thank you. Thanks a lot. I think this was great. I got some homework to do, like rewatch part 2 and 4, and get like based on our discussion here. And I invite all the listeners to give Liam a follow, because he not only has like amazing insights and great reviews, the memes are amazing. And if you're into memes, they're just there. He's a treasure of the horror community. Because of the memes, people just really love them. And he's always there's a mutual challenge here, which is to keep the spoilers away until the end of the month when it comes to Halloween kills. And I've been lucky enough to follow some accounts, but not seeing the spoilers, and I haven't seen Jamie Lee Curtis ruining for me, so hopefully let's keep it that way until the movie premieres.
Yeah, hopefully. Just a month ago, and then we're home.
And we're all done.